All right, everyone, welcome to the speed build. For those who don't know, I'm Astrid, aka Curious Carrot Top. I usually do streams, but I wanted to try out doing a little speed build of a yellow gen home that I am making for San Sequoia. My not so berry challenge is something that I just do on my downtime. I don't stream or record it, but I really wanted to record this build since I had started it on stream, and I was like, you know what, I'll give people the option of seeing how I finished it. It is uploaded on the gallery, and I will put that information in the text later on in this video so that everyone can see what to look up. My gallery ID is the same as my YouTube channel ID, Curious Carrot Top, all spelled normally with no spaces. So if you're curious, you can go ahead and check that out. Give it a like and download if you enjoyed it and would like it in your game. So I'm just starting off with the kitchen, and I loved this backsplash so much. When I saw that it had a yellow swatch, I knew that I needed it in my yellow gen home. And so I'm just kind of trying out different things to put in there. As you can see, I really enjoy the yellow being present, but not too overwhelming. So I go for more like pastel yellows in most of these rooms. So there's a little bit of mind changing going on right now. But I realized that the kitchen is just huge. So I was like, I'm going to make it even bigger and give a nice little coffee bar or something, and then an island. So you can see me doing that, and that'll be the final layout. I had to do something about that middle. So what I ended up doing was I made a room with half walls, and then I used platforms. I hadn't done it in a while, so I kind of messed up the first time, but I made a room with half walls and then used platforms to make it a little slightly raised center. Now, I don't love the lighting that happened as a result of this. I think if I were to do it back again, I would probably see if there was a way to make a counter look okay in the middle, or just make the island smaller, just because of that lighting looking a little bit odd because it's a room. But honestly, for the first time doing this, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty happy with this kitchen. I didn't do a whole lot of decorating in this kitchen. I think I put a couple of essentials, well, not essentials, but a couple of useful items from the Home Chef Hustle pack. But you'll see later, I didn't really do a ton of decorating on the walls. And part of that was just for the sake of time, and part of that was just for the sake of letting there be space for my sim to eventually put more on it. So I'm trying out these cabinets right now, but decided that didn't really work the way I wanted it to. So you can see I'm looking at different shelving, and I did end up going with shelves from Home Chef Hustle. And I do end up just leaving them empty, like I said, just so that there can be more space for stuff that my yellow gen sim ends up getting down the road. But also, I didn't want there to be a huge chunk of time of me just putting stuff on the shelf, especially because some people are really good at it. They're super efficient with it. I am not efficient with it. So maybe in the future, I'll do a little bit more with decorating if I do more speed builds. But yeah, for this, I decided not to get too detail oriented. I just kind of wanted to get all the basics down for this. And so I'm doing this little alcove now, which I really love, just having this cute little breakfast nook. And I wanted to find some good plants for it. You all know I love a good plant. I think a lot of people do in this game. It is just so nice and fun. So I'm just searching for some nice plants, some more hanging plants to just spruce up the area. And then of course curtains, something that I always forget in my personal builds, but I've been challenging myself to be more thorough with adding things like curtains and wall decorations in my streams and anything I record. So I think I ended up settling on the Dream Home Decorator curtains in a different swatch. So like this build is a lot of like yellow and white. So just working on all of that stuff. And I don't know if I put curtains over in that alcove or not. And so now we're moving on to the living room. There's a little bit of debate and deliberation for the fireplace. There somehow feels like there's too many and too few fireplaces, I feel like. So at first I do decide on this more like classic fireplace, but later on you'll see I do end up changing that just because I ended up feeling like it was not quite the right vibe with, I think it was like color scheme and also just having like more modern stuff. So you'll see later on, I can't remember quite when, but you'll see later on that I do end up changing that fireplace. And so now I'm just looking for rugs and finding things that would fit the area properly, adjusting little things like that. And just looking for nice yellow swatches that work with the style that I'm going for and the swatches that I'm going for. So more deliberation. For this speed build, I'm not going to cut out much, if any, of like the moments when there's that like deliberation. But in the future, I might play around more with editing. This is just my first time doing a speed build with voiceover, so I'm just kind of playing around with it, seeing what works, what doesn't. And yeah, so you can see I did switch out that fireplace, and now I'm just decorating the rest, getting all the essentials that I really like to have. So like having a nice little place for music, and then I really wanted these plants in the corner, but I realized that if I wasn't careful, I would end up blocking the Sims pathway to the couch, and I did not want to do that. So you'll see me playing around with different ways of doing those types of things. And it ended up being a little more simple than what my first plant was, which I'm kind of sad about. I do like having more plants, but I also wanted this to be functional. Like, in my case, I do like my builds to be functional and easy to use and download. So while I have not play tested the build that's on the gallery, I've played with it since uploading and it didn't seem to have any issues. So this should be a fully functional build. I haven't encountered any issues since playing with it myself. And now you can see I'm just trying to figure out if there's something I can put in this big empty space. And I ended up deciding not to put anything there just for the sake of having the space. There wasn't really anything that I felt would work in a non-forced way. So now I'm just going around doing little things, starting with, it looks like I'm doing the bathroom. And then behind the bathroom is going to be like a little pantry. So just working on those things, finding some basics for each little space, keeping it nice and yellow, adjusting doors a little bit. So you'll notice, I don't know if anyone would do this, but there are some slight differences to the shell on the gallery compared to the final version on the gallery, just because of those little door space changes that I made. So I'm just going in and doing like little accessories and whatnot. And yeah. Okay, so now we're looking at the dining room, which I felt was a decent size. I was a little bummed that I couldn't put like a full bar in, but any bigger, and it felt like it might be a little excessive for this specific sim. So other than this one little basket and moving some things in the living room, a little bit of an ADHD moment there, we are working on the dining room now, and I wanted it to fit in nicely with that wallpaper and this like semi-modern feel that we have to the house, or semi-contemporary, I suppose would be the right term. I love, love, love these curtains. I'm so glad that these kits, these collaboration kits, brought us these wonderful curtains. I didn't need the curtain rod in between, but I'm really glad we have that item in the game. I'm just so excited that EA is now collaborating a lot more with different creators because it's starting to bring us these awesome ideas that previously we only saw in custom content. And as of recording this, the creator kits just came out for the very first time. The Slumber Party and the Cozy Kitsch, I believe is what they're called. And I'm super excited about those. Haven't gotten a chance to buy them yet, but definitely excited. It's nice to see that EA seems to be going in a good direction with that. So I'm really hopeful for these creator kits, and also just like the idea of people who are not able to use mods, whether that be through being console players or just having a PC that either can't handle it, or maybe it's just personal preference, like allowing those players to also get some of that fun aspect of using what these amazing creators have to offer. So being able to have that in the game itself is just so cool to me, and I'm really glad they're doing it, and I hope that they continue to, because I know with some things they'll like say they're about to do something, but they don't really follow up in the future. Like for example, I'm thinking of pack refreshes. That's something that I wish they had done more of, and I'm kind of bummed that they haven't, and I hope they can resurrect that at some point because I do think there's a demand for it. But yeah, anyway, so as you can see, I'm figuring out the decorations for this room. I ended up going for these city living paintings. I wanted it to be as cohesive as possible in each room. So having paintings that were generally the same style was important to me. And I didn't stick as much to the yellow theme for things like paintings. I thought that was a good way to bring in other colors to the space so it wasn't just so aggressively yellow. So we're just finishing up this dining room. The lighting, I don't love how the lighting is kind of dark in some of the corners. I'm not sure why that is. I wonder if it's just the light that I chose. But yeah, that's the dining room. And there's one more thing I will change later on, and that's just like the sculpture in that corner. But for all intents and purposes, the dining room's now done. So I'm now just quickly doing this little pantry where I just want to put, yeah, so there's that last little sculpture change in the dining room. And then it's moving on to the pantry where I just wanted to put in some basics. So I put in like the water heater. And then as I was going, I found a couple things to put on the kitchen counters. So I just wanted it to be something that made sense for that space. It was originally like a pantry, closet, utilities room in the real life floor plan that I based this on. And I decided, I was like, you know what? We have enough assets in the game that I can make that happen. I do wish we had like prettier options for the pantry. So like I can't quite remember the pack, but that big shelving thing with like all the spices and boxes that I put in that pantry, it does what I want it to do, but it doesn't look quite as pretty as I'd like it to. I'd really love it if in maybe some kind of pack or kit or something, we could get some kind of more like home pantry items. I wonder if that could be something that would probably be in like some kind of kit. But yeah, that's kind of on my wish list. And feel free to share in your comments like what your wish list is for The Sims. I know I've seen a lot of people posting about that on like Blue Sky, which I love, by the way. If you're not on Blue Sky, definitely go check it out. It is such a wonderful little platform. I'm not like affiliated with them or anything. I'm just sharing that I really enjoy it. It's a very like positive vibe right now, and we're starting to get some bigger names coming to the platform. There's a couple of sim gurus now. There are some very big mod creators and CC creators. So it's definitely a good place to be if you're thinking about adopting a new social media. I definitely recommend checking it out. So that was just a nice little side tangent. And now we're working on the office. So I really wanted this sim to have an office. Most of my sims have offices, but this sim in particular, I wanted to have one because it is important to his career and his aspiration to be able to do things like play chess and read and whatnot, since Yellow Gen has the nerd brain aspiration. And you can see I do switch over the wallpaper to something a little less aggressive. I didn't love that shade of yellow that the Paranormal Pack wallpaper was. It was just a little too intense for me. So that was the main floor. Now we're moving up to the second floor, and I'm just doing basics. I decided that the bathrooms other than the primary bathroom would be gray, since the next generation is the gray gen. So you'll see 2 gray bathrooms and 1 gray nursery just to get ready for that next gen. Hasn't been born yet in the save file this is for. In fact, the Yellow Gen sim is still single and not even mingling yet. He's very focused on his career, but I did want to have the house prepared since I wanted this to be his forever home. So I'm just working on finding those little gray accents and trying to make it look, nice and not too just gray and blah, which I did struggle a little bit when I was making the shell with finding swatches that I really liked for the gray rooms. I didn't struggle as much with the nursery though, because as you'll see later, there is that new like picturesque wallpaper that comes in gray, and normally I don't have a reason to use it. I don't love the like grayness of it, but for the gray gen it is absolutely perfect. So I was really excited to use that. And so we're working on this other bathroom. Nothing too complicated, nothing too fancy, just putting in the essentials. And then we'll be moving on to some of these other rooms. So this room right now is going to be an exercise room. I really wanted there to be an exercise room in this house for this sim because he will have to be working out as part of his astronaut career. So that was an element that I really wanted to incorporate. So I'm just putting down the basic athletic items, and then also some music, since I like to have my sims listen to music while they work out. It's just a little bit of realism that I like to put in my games. And then I also put a yoga mat, just because I find that the yoga mat can be just a fun little thing to have my sims do if they have nothing else to do, or if I'm trying to work on bonus traits for kids and teens with I think it's their emotional control that the yoga mat helps with. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know it helps with one of those children's and teens traits that you can get a bonus trait for if they're high enough or low enough when they age up. So I'm just putting up some finishing touches. I wanted to put up some little posters and things, and then I'll end up putting up some mirrors as well. And yeah, so we're just finishing up this room. Okay, and now we're working on the primary bedroom, which is admittedly huge. And then, of course, in that corner, you'll see me playing around with different little rooms and closets and things because the roof was clipping over there. So I played around with a few items and I thought about doing a closet of some sort, but decided it just made the room too strange of a shape. So I ended up trying that, but scrapping it. And then I was able to find a wardrobe that helped with that issue. So yeah, you see me playing around with it, deciding that it's not quite right, and then trying a little bit with beds and then realizing it's just a little too odd. So I go back and I change it, and then I just find a way to cover it with furnishing. So a lot of this room has like white accents just to go along with that wallpaper. So you see me messing around with like different bed options. I do like to get the more expensive beds just for the sake of how good they are with the energy gain. I got so used to having like super high efficient energy gain bedding in previous generations of this save that now that my sim has the money, I just give him some decent beds. Like the one I do end up going with, it's not like the top tier, but it does help pretty well. So now I'm just working on finding some nice little things for like a little sitting area and getting everything spaced out nicely and decorated and all of that. And I just want to say, I love that like plant light in the corner. It's not an item I typically notice because I don't often use the floor lamp style lights. But when I saw that, I knew I just had to have it in this build because like I've said before, I'll say it a million more times in my life, I just love plants. I love plants in real life and in this game. So it ended up being a no-brainer to put that floor lamp with plants into this build. Then you'll see this little side quest to put some things next to the front door, just like a quick coat hanger and umbrella before I go back to the bedroom, which is just about finished. I decided that with a room this big, an ottoman would be good, which for me is just like the fanciest thing, having an ottoman at the foot of the bed. Like for some reason, I just associate that with being so fancy and wealthy. So with this giant room, I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's put that at the foot of the bed. And then just doing some finishing touches with some wall decor. Okay, and that's where I place the family portrait item that came with Life and Death. The gallery does not have that item though, because I realized when I first tried to upload it that it is flagged as CC. I think in the same way that like photos are flagged as CC, just because I guess it's the way it interacts with the save file and everything. So the gallery does not have that family portrait on it, but it does have everything else. I just really didn't want my house to be flagged as CC just for this like one thing. So now I'm just doing this little upper landing area, just getting some nice little decorations, and then debating things with rugs. It's kind of an oddly shaped landing area as far as rugs go. So there was a little bit of deliberation and back and forth in my head about what to put up here. But I did end up finding something that I liked, and you'll see that pretty shortly. It didn't take too much time, I don't think, to decide on what to keep. Now we're just going into the primary bathroom, and that one's pretty simple. I did give it a fancy bathtub and one of my favorite mirrors. You'll see I tried to put it elsewhere earlier in the build and it hadn't fit, but there is this wonderful mirror that's just like a bunch of lovely rectangles. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. And I just love doing this setup with the counters and then just like a basic sink and then my favorite wall mirror with those rectangles. I'm just obsessed with that mirror. I love that it works in this build. And then, yeah, that just finishes up the primary bathroom, just a few finishing touches, and then we'll move on from that. Okay, and at this point, I was debating whether or not to continue furnishing the rooms, just because the spare rooms I decided would end up being the nursery and guest room. And at first, I wasn't thinking I would finish them. So I moved on to the backyard, which right now is just huge and empty. But this is kind of a trust the process moment where I played around with a few different options and ended up looking at the trees that were around and ended up filling it in with like some landscaping. There ends up being a lovely little pond. So I just played around with like a few different things to see what would work. So here's where I decided to make the pond. I always overfill it before getting to the point where it's like actually the right level, at least for my preferences. And with my ponds, I pretty much always put a willow tree next to them. It's just, I associate willow trees with ponds. They like to grow near ponds. So in my mind, it just works perfectly. And so I work on some basic landscaping, turning the pond into a nice little pond color, getting these lovely, ducks and fish and a turtle log and all these other things that kind of make the pond just feel more alive. time just putting in like some nice grasses and bushes and rocks to make that edge of the pond look a little more dynamic. And this was a bit of a challenge for me. I don't often push myself when it comes to landscaping. It's another area that since I started streaming and recording, I've been challenging myself more with. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It's, by no means the best thing ever done for a pond, but considering that I am not so much of a landscaper, I'm pretty proud with how it ended up in the end, with having, nice little flowers and places for grass. And I end up putting a nice little bench area for Sims to just sit and watch the water and the ducks and everything. And then here I had a little bit of an issue with the rocks kind of floating. So you see me trying to see if there's a way I can correct that. There wasn't a whole lot I felt I could do. A more experienced builder might have known some tricks that I didn't, but I wasn't really able to figure anything out in the end. So I tried with a few things, but ended up not really doing too much to change what was happening. I think I ended up just putting more landscaping down to kind of just hide that gap. And so here I'm moving on to the other side of the pond and trying to find a nice little bench that will work, something simple. It looks a little more like a park bench, but having something that looked more like outdoor furniture just didn't quite feel like it would work quite right. So you'll see me messing around a little bit with the spacing of everything. And then I put a little bit more landscaping over near that bench, if I remember correctly. Then I went ahead and went in with all of the terrain paint. And I decided not to do terrain paint under the flowers, at least not dirt terrain paint. I wanted it to look like there were some more like flowers and clover blooming in this area, which was a little tricky to try and blend in with the surroundings, but I tried to make it nice so that at the edges it wasn't too stark. And then I'm just going around, and I had a little bit of issues with the mouse placement. It just wasn't wanting to fully go behind those trees. I'm not sure what the deal was with that, because that's not an issue that I've had in the past. So you'll see there's some back and forth with trying to place these bits of terrain paint with this little issue that I was having with the mouse placement. And then now I'm doing some of the front landscaping, which I did go back and forth with a lot, with trying to find various solutions for this, to have a combination of just like super manicured, but also having little elements that were more, I don't know, dynamic, I suppose. So I tried out a few different things to fill these spaces and ended up doing just a variety of like little bushes and plants and things to fill the odd little corners and try to make it just look nice and lush and have just like a nice happy medium between this like super manicured and super wild. So I go around and try a few different things. I love doing this trick with the low-lying plants that I picked up from Lil Simsy. I just love the way they help put a nice little border, and it feels like just a nice little finishing touch to me. So I like to do that a lot as well. So I'm just going in with different bushes and flowers and trying to just flesh it out and have that marriage of uniformity with more dynamic and different elements. Moving on to the front porch, which I decided to center the seating along the window. I think if I went back and did this again, I would center it between the columns. But for this one, I decided to center it around the windows and just have a nice little yellow seating area that Sims can come to and just relax on their nice little porch. I love porches IRL, so furnishing them in the game is always really fun to me. And then I did just remember that when I built this, I did forget to put a mailbox in. So if you do download this from the gallery, first of all, thank you. But also just note that for some reason, it didn't seem to automatically place a mailbox, at least not in my save. And I had forgotten to place one. So that is just something that is lacking on the gallery, just so you know. And then I'm going in with some landscaping. In my mind, it was finishing touches, but there was a little more I wanted to do with furnishing those upstairs bedrooms. And then there's a little bit more I do in the backyard. I played around with, what kinds of paths I would want. And I settled on like a more winding terrain paint path, one that goes all the way around from one side entrance on the fence. And then the other one, I didn't wrap around the entire house. I just wrapped it around this back and just did like a basic, starting point just outside that gate. And then I went around and tried to layer the terrain paint, another trick that I picked up from watching Lil Simsy that I really like. In my mind, I think it just makes things look a little nicer, a little more, I don't know, it just seems a little more visually pleasing to me. It gives a little more depth, I think, to a lot of the terrain paint. So I did a little bit of that terrain paint layering over there on the edges. Then I tried to place some nice little lights around so that it'll look pretty nice and lit up even in the evenings in the game. And then Yellow Gen doesn't have anything to do with planter boxes or anything like that, but I was like, you know what? Planter boxes can be great. I often use the more expensive flowers or really mid-range flowers in this game as a way for Sims to make an extra few hundred simoleons each day. So I'll often plant like snapdragons or other similarly priced flowers just so that they can have a little bit of extra income without having to do too much extra work. So that's why I often place some kind of area for them to have a lovely little gardening space. And then, of course, I did place down the rocket ship since this is a Yellow Gen house. It is not built. I will say if anyone wants a version where the rocket ship is built and there's a greenhouse, let me know and I will upload that version, because since I've been playing with it, I ended up building a little greenhouse in one of the corners of the backyard, and then the rocket ship is fully built and upgraded. So if anyone does want that version, go ahead and let me know in the comments and I will upload it to the gallery if that is the case, and I'll post about it just in a basic post here on YouTube if that does happen. So here's when I decided to do the nursery and guest room. I played around with a few different options for cribs, but ended up going with the base game one that matches the growing together options, I believe it was. And I think I do end up changing these swatches, but not too severely if I did. So this is the one where I was like, okay, I want this to be, cute and furnished and dynamic and comfortable without being too, blah, because it's gray. But I ended up pretty happy with it in the end, having, little seating areas and the basics of furniture. And I think further on, I will probably give them a little dollhouse, but for the sake of this build, I didn't do that just because it's built more for like an infant. And it didn't really make sense to me to take up a ton of space with a dollhouse until they were at least a toddler. And so now I'm putting a little sitting area in. And that stool, it looks kind of like a stool or ottoman. That is actually also a chair. So that will be good for especially toddlers when they want to sit and listen to someone read, or sit and listen to, or sit while they are eating. Because I often just put a mini fridge in the rooms with the toddlers and just make it easy for myself to take food in and out of the fridge. So the seating area was also done with that in mind. There is not a mini fridge in this build, but once my sim ends up getting a toddler, rest assured there will be. And then last but not least, I'm going into this guest room. We've got only a couple minutes left of this build, and I decided to just do a yellow guest room in case, family comes to stay. They can have their own little space. If my Sims ends up having more than one child, this guest room will be converted to their bedroom. But for now, I just wanted a nice little, soft yellow guest room for friends or family that end up wanting to stay, or if my sim wants to plan a stay over. So the build is coming to an end, and I just want to say thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this, please go ahead and like and subscribe and comment if you want to see more things like this, since this was my first time ever doing something like this. So thank you again, and have a lovely day or night wherever you are, and I will see you all next time. Bye y'all.